Seattle get a third-round pick back. Geno gets a much bigger deal than Seattle were willing to offer, approximately $45 million average per year. The contract offer they were going to give Geno Smith has been accepted by Sam Darnold, who lands himself in Seattle. Seattle also moving a bunch of other players out. We'll talk all about the Seahawks coming up. Meanwhile, Justin Fields goes to the Jets, 2-year deal, $30 million guaranteed, $40 million overall. Looks kind of like it might just be a 1-year deal, similar to when Derek Carr returned back with the Raiders. And right now, we still don't know what the Steelers are doing, with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson being probably their two most likely landing spots. And increasingly, we're looking like the Tennessee Titans are going to take Cam Ward, and there's going to be a bum fight behind them for who gets Shedeur Sanders. So where do you want to start with that, Brian? Like, with all of those moves, take something from that you like and you want to talk about.
I want to start with Myles Garrett. That's where I've been waiting all week to get into. I would say go off, but I don't want to give away the show. I've been waiting all week to get into the Myles Garrett. We will hold that.
Take a breath. We'll get there.
I think I know what you want to get into, and it's fun. And it started all this. Geno Smith, right? Like, did somebody really pursue that's my opinion. Like, Geno Smith to me is okay. He's a starter. You're not winning the Super Bowl with Geno Smith. The fact that he has changed teams, that he was pursued, but that the team that let him go probably needed him more. I just don't understand the Geno Smith move. I don't understand the Geno Smith move for the Raiders unless they plan to draft a quarterback, because Geno Smith is not your future, Will. Like, we can 100% disagree on this. I don't care. I know that I'm right on this. Geno Smith is not going to take the Raiders to the top of the AFC West next year.
Geno Smith is essentially a high-end bridge quarterback.
He's a bridge quarterback.
But what I would argue is that, and our friends Greg Rosenthal and their team around the NFL used to do this thing called the Dalton scale, which was, if you have a quarterback who is Andy Dalton or better, then you have a chance to compete. This was when he was on the Bengals.
When he was good, Andy Dalton.
If you have somebody who is below him on the scale, then you need to find yourself a quarterback. And I would argue that scale right now sits around Geno Smith. I would argue differently.
This is why we have the show, and this is where we have fun.
His performances of the last 3 years in Seattle, and I say this begrudgingly, have been that of a top 12 to 15 NFL quarterback. And doing it whilst under consistent duress in a system which wasn't very good, with an offensive line that was absolutely dreadful, with underperforming receivers outside. DK Metcalf had one of his worst seasons last year.
He still had DK Metcalf, who was good enough for another team to go out and give him major money and trade for him. I completely, in a fun way, disagree with you. Geno Smith is he's Geno Smith. He's average. He's meh. He doesn't move the meter. Why did you have to go out and get Geno Smith? But the flip side of it, and this is where it's fun, this is the dominoes, is that Seattle should have kept him. Like, I'm telling you that's now, what really blows my mind, is that Seattle's going to do this with Sam Darnold, and what does that really get you? I don't understand any of this, Will.
After Stafford decided to stay at the Rams, of all these other quarterbacks we're talking about, if you are a team who wants to win now, I'd say arguably the only team really on this list of teams we're talking about, Seattle, a 10-win team last season who missed out on the playoffs thanks to a strength of schedule nonsense, and maybe Pittsburgh, right? Of those two teams, those should have been the two teams where Geno Smith landed. Because of these quarterbacks, of Rodgers, of Darnold, of everyone here, I think Geno gives you the best chance to win now.
Geno's better than Sam Darnold?
Right. So this is where we need to get into it. This is fun.
This is fun. This is what we do here.
Sam Darnold played better than Geno Smith last year. Right? I don't think anyone has any bones about that, right? But he was in Minnesota with a fantastic scheme,
fair point,
with a good offensive line, with maybe the best 1-2 punch at receiver in the NFL, plus a good running back, a good tight end. Like, everything was set up for him to succeed. What you have is him moving to Seattle, where with Geno Smith, they had a guy who consistently bailed them out over the last 2 years, who had a time to throw of well below 2.5 seconds, whereas Sam Darnold is one of the longest in the NFL, closer to 3.5 seconds, and that's a real worry. They have an offensive line which doesn't do the business, and they've got rid of two players in Tyler Lockett, who, okay, he's probably at a point where he might be retiring, but
still good.
Good, experienced possession receiver.
A number two, number three receiver in the NFL.
And they're great outside guy. Now, Jackson Smith and Jigba emerged last year, became their number one guy, and I'm a big fan of his. But they've essentially, if anyone tries to argue with me that Seattle are in any way a stronger team now than they were 3 days ago, I think they'd need to have their head examined, because Sam Darnold is so not a fit with what their current staffing is.
And is due to return to planet Earth pretty soon. And he did at the end of last season.
And here's the thing, right? The argument in the heads of the people involved, and I really think John Schneider brought in Geno Smith at a time where he brought him in to have, a quarterback battle where he thought it was going to be a bridge thing, where he thought he was going to last a year, and he outplayed what everyone expected him to. And maybe Geno Smith should have looked at the $30 million a year which they've offered. Well, it's like, about 36 they've given Darnold. It's basically the Baker Mayfield deal with the percentage of the new cap added on top of it, right? So maybe he should have looked at that deal and gone, do you know what, actually, this situation's been really great for me, but if he can get $10 million more a year and go and play for the Raiders after the career he's had, I've got no problem with that at 34 years old. He solved so many of their problems last year, which Sam Darnold doesn't. But I think they've brought Clint Kubiak in and they've gone, right, we want to run the ball a load more. We want to run a load of play action. And Sam Darnold is better suited, in theory, to that system. The problem is that to run play action, they want to run under centre, and they don't think Geno Smith can run under centre. If Sam Darnold, the moment he turns his back to that defense to hand the ball off, whether it's play action, whether it's a run from under center, every time with the middle of their offensive line right now, he is going to get hit time and time. He might get sacked an average of 5 times a game next season if they don't.
And he's not a mobile quarterback. You know, I mean, he's
With all of these things, you have to take a bit of a long-term view, and maybe they spend 9 draft picks and they're all on interior offensive linemen and 3 of them land. But when you consider what the Bears have done in the last 2 weeks, and we'll get on to them, If the Seattle had done that and then paired this move, I'd understand it. But Sam Darnold going into that offense as it was last season, I think is going to be a disaster and is going to make everyone look bad in this situation. It's going to cost John Schneider his job.
I like Geno Smith reuniting with Pete Carroll, right? Like that's a really cool story. Is it going to work in Las Vegas? I don't know. You mentioned last week on the show, Las Vegas has talent. They re-up Max Crosby. They should have been better than they were. They have some talent. You have Tom Brady. This is just a start. You're going to have, everyone forgets, it's free agency and the draft, right? It's not just free agency. It's free agency and the draft, because when you're building these teams, you have this huge, huge board and you're piecing it all together, and it starts in free agency. I've always been of the opinion, and a lot of general managers think the same thing, they should flip-flop it. You really should have the draft and then free agency, but they'll never do that because the NFLPA and the players want to get paid up front and get this done. I like Geno Smith going back with Pete Carroll in Vegas. Justin Fields to the Jets. I can't really figure that one out either. What do they really think that they're getting? And is Justin Fields going to take you from 5 wins to 10 wins? I don't think he can do that. It was a free agency quarterback soup of meh, and all they really did was just spin the carousel around. The best one for me is Aaron Rodgers, if he is still has some version. Aaron Rodgers is like Darth Vader, right? Is there anything left in Darth Vader that's still Anakin Skywalker? Is there anything left of old Aaron Rodgers left in current Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. Someone's going to pay way too much money to find out, but I just feel like everyone just moved the carousel around, and they're all in different places, and nobody's going to be that good next year.
I think the Jets are accepting that with Aaron Glenn and coming off the back of the Aaron Rodgers era, that they are in a rebuild, and that Justin Fields, for what he's been paid, which, as I said, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed.
It's a smart contract.
It's practically high-end backup money. It's nowhere near that kind of what we consider a lower-tier backup, the Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold type money. So essentially, they stay reasonably cheap at the position. They give themselves a chance to maybe draft someone, whether that's moving up, whether that's waiting for the 2nd or 3rd round and getting a Dart, or Jalen Milroe, someone like that, and seeing how they work. And Justin Fields has had flashes, and he's a good running quarterback, and he's had flashes. He was
solid to start with Pittsburgh last year before he lost his job to Russell Wilson. And I remember all Steelers fans were freaking out because they were winning with Justin Fields. They didn't want to screw it up.
And listen, Pittsburgh wanted Justin Fields back. They actually looked at the move they made last year, which at the time got lauded because Russell Wilson won his first 2 or 3 starts. Ignoring the fact he went 0-5 to end the season and they collapsed entirely, they wanted Justin Fields back. They saw him as the cheaper, better option whilst they tried to figure out what they were going to do long term at the position. And instead, they're probably going to end up with Russell Wilson, but maybe Aaron Rodgers. Now, DK Metcalf, I think is not in the same way George Pickens is an off-the-field issue necessarily.
But he is a bit of an issue. I have no problem saying, like, I'm not going to get in trouble saying that. DK Metcalf is a bit of an issue, and it's okay to say that. It's 2025. We don't have to, be on eggshells and not worry about offending anyone. This isn't the woke era anymore. We all know that. DK Metcalf is a bit of an issue at times. I love that DK Metcalf signed with the Steelers, or goes to the Steelers, and he doesn't know who his quarterback's going to be. That's very DK Metcalf to me.
We might end up catching passes from Russell Wilson again, which, in a way...
Wouldn't that be amazing?
I think what DK Metcalf tells us, because they've given him the big contract, right? I think it tells us the Steelers are going to move on from Pickens. I don't know if that's this offseason or they try and play them together this year, but he's only got a year left on the deal.
Really good time to trade someone like George Pickens, and I would love to be right on this, but really good time to trade is during the draft. A lot of those guys, the guys that have multiple issues, the guys who you want to move, but the time to move that because you're going to get a fifth round pick, a third round pick, and you just accept it and you move on. I would not be surprised if George Pickens gets moved during the NFL draft.
But if Pickens and Metcalf take to the field together next year,
interesting.
The skill sets are incredibly similar.
Yeah.
They're both outside guys. They're both, bump and run guys. They've both got big hands. So you surely have to go with Russell Wilson because at least he can throw a decent deep ball. Those two with Aaron Rodgers, where Aaron Rodgers is a nightmare off the field and George Pickens is a nightmare off the field, and DK Metcalf gives up more penalties.
That is and I know they did Hard Knocks not long ago. That is Hard Knocks' dream. That has to be.
What's Mike Tomlin doing? Is he trying to give himself like a like?
Is he trying to get himself fired? Is that what you're saying?
I feel. Could
you imagine dealing with Aaron? This is so amazing. I really do want. I want Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens all in the same offense, in the same locker room. That team, they will be having fights. They will also go on retreats together. They will be reality TV 2025, and they're going to win 8 games.
Wild. Absolutely wild. I think that kind of covers the quarterback side of it, and a little bit about DK to Pittsburgh as well. We'll go through our biggest winners and losers because there's so many stories to cover and so many teams to get into. And we've kind of talked the Seahawks already. I want to talk Niners. I want to talk Pats. I want to talk the Bears and Rams are a couple of ones I've got on my list. Certainly I want to get your idea on what on earth the Texans are doing.
Myles Garrett.
Let's talk Myles Garrett.
Can we do that now?
Let's do that right now.
I love we're just winging it because there's so much going on. You can't cover everything. You literally have to go back and you're seeing 1,000 stories. Oh man, the NFL, the fact that the NFL can go, Will, from the Super Bowl to the Combine to free agency. Every once in a while I hear from somebody like, what happens when the NFL stops?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've heard this my whole life, what do you do? And I'm like, and it's a very nice question and they're just curious. So I accept that. But somewhere in my head, I'm like, are you bleeping kidding? The NFL is bigger the second they stop playing games.
There's literally about 9 days from after the Super Bowl call-off, around Tuesday, Wednesday, when everyone's kind of sick about talking about who won the Super Bowl, till the Combine starts, where it feels dead. And then you get to the Combine and all the GMs and coaches start talking and suddenly, bang, we're going again. Here we go, off to the races.
The second free agency ends, it's going to be a month build-up. The biggest part of the year, other than the actual season for me, is always that month build-up because free agency will end, and about April 1st, Fool's Day, it's the build up to the draft, and it is just draft, and you have that, and then you bring the whole band back together because you have the rookie mini camps and the workouts, and then OTAs, and then they go away and they get arrested, and you have some off the field issues because they're not playing, and then you're into training camp. Then it's a build up to training camp, and you have holdouts. The fact that the NFL is able to take a 17-game season and to turn it into a year-round circus that we have to pay attention to. I always will say that is the NFL's greatest trick, that the NFL only plays 17 games a year, and we care about it more in the offseason than the regular season. It's so fun. It's so addicting. And then you have Myles Garrett happen.